What if the safest place on Earth turned out to be the most dangerous place to be standing? For 30 years, Iran believed that if they just dug deep enough, no bomb on the planet could touch them. That belief just got tested in real combat, and it failed right in front of the entire world. Before we go any further, if you want more breakdowns like this one, hit like right now. It takes 1 second, and it tells me you want more of this kind of analysis. Subscribe if you're new here, and if you know someone who's been asking what actually happened in Iran, send them this video instead of trying to explain it yourself. Let's get into it. To understand why this moment is such a big deal, you need to rewind about 3 decades. Back in 1991, during the Gulf War, the world watched the United States take apart an entire army using precision airstrikes. It wasn't just a win. It was a demonstration of power so overwhelming that military planners in other countries had to sit down and rewrite their entire strategy books. Nations that didn't get along with America watched closely, and they didn't learn, don't fight the US. They learned something far more specific. They learned, don't leave anything valuable where American planes can find it. So a pattern started quietly, almost invisibly, throughout the 1990s. Country after country began burying their most important military assets underground, not just basements or shallow bunkers. We're talking hundreds of feet into solid mountains wrapped in reinforced concrete, built to survive almost anything a bomb could throw at them. North Korea did it on a massive scale, hiding artillery, command centers, and entire manufacturing lines inside mountains. Iran watched, took careful notes, and did it even harder, treating underground construction not as an emergency measure, but as a long-term national project. The idea behind all of this was simple. If you can't be found, you can't be hit. And if you can't be hit, you hold real leverage in any standoff, no matter how powerful your enemy is on paper. For a long time, that idea actually worked, and it worked well enough that entire military doctrines were built around it. Generals planned entire wars, assuming certain targets simply couldn't be touched. And that assumption shaped everything from negotiation strategy to public statements made by government officials standing at podiums, confident in a protection that existed mostly on paper and in solid rock. America's best available bunker buster at the time was called the GBU-58. It weighed close to 5,000 pounds and could punch through about 20 feet of solid concrete or roughly 100 feet of packed earth. In 1991, that was considered incredible, almost unbeatable. But by the mid-2000s, it was already becoming outdated because Iran had done the math. They knew exactly what that bomb could do. They studied its specifications carefully, and they built their most important nuclear site deeper than it could ever physically reach. That site is called Fordow. It sits buried inside a mountain near the city of Qom, and for years, its entire purpose was to be untouchable. A fortress designed around a single idea: total invulnerability. Nobody even knew it existed until 2009, when intelligence agencies uncovered it, using satellite images and other classified sources. And here's the part that should genuinely give you chills. When it was exposed to the world, Iran didn't deny it, didn't scramble to explain it away. They basically confirmed it outright and said, in plain words, that it was designed to survive a military strike. At the time, they were completely right about that. So the American military went back to the drawing board, knowing the old solution simply wasn't good enough anymore. They needed something bigger, heavier, and far more capable than anything that had ever existed before. That's how the GBU-57 was born, and its official nickname says everything you need to know about its purpose: the Massive Ordnance Penetrator. Let that name sink in for a second. This isn't a regular bomb dropped from a fighter jet. It weighs around 30,000 pounds. To put that in perspective, that's roughly 15 times heavier than a standard smart bomb used in most everyday airstrikes around the world. Inside, it is over 5,000 pounds of pure high-explosive material, wrapped in a shell made from a specially engineered hardened steel alloy, designed for one single job: to punch through solid rock and layers of concrete without breaking apart from the sheer force of impact. This weapon can drive through around 200 feet of reinforced concrete, or about 130 feet of solid rock, before it even detonates. And here's the truly genius part of the design. It doesn't explode the moment it hits something on the surface. It has a built-in delay system that can be programmed down to the exact millisecond. Mission planners can calculate exactly how long it will take the bomb to smash through each layer of a bunker, floor by floor, wall by wall, room by room, and set the fuse to go off at the precise moment it reaches the most important, most heavily protected chamber deep inside. Think carefully about what that actually means. You're not simply blowing the roof off a building and hoping for the best. You're placing a 5,000-pound explosion directly inside the very heart of a facility that took an entire decade to design and construct. There is no blast door on Earth strong enough to survive that kind of force. There is no clever engineering design that can spread that much energy away safely without catastrophic failure. When this bomb detonates inside a hardened underground room, that room simply ceases to exist as a functional space. It's not damaged, it's erased. Only one aircraft on the entire planet can carry this weapon, the B-2 Spirit stealth bomber. And even that highly advanced aircraft can only carry 2 of these bombs at a time, because they are genuinely that massive and heavy. You can't send a regular fighter jet to drop something this size and expect any kind of precision. You need a plane specifically built for stealth, built for extremely long range, and built to fly at high altitude above enemy defenses, while still hitting a target with pinpoint accuracy down to the exact coordinate. Developing this weapon cost the US government more than $300 million, and the program went through several rounds of serious upgrades over the years, including one major upgrade, after new intelligence suggested Iran had dug even deeper than originally estimated. Read that again, because it matters. The US found out Iran had gone deeper underground, and instead of giving up on the idea of ever reaching them, American engineers funded an upgrade specifically to close that gap. This was a quiet, decades-long competition between one country trying to hide and another country determined to reach them, no matter how long it took. And that competition just ended decisively in favor of the side with the bigger drill and the deeper pockets. Now let's talk about what Iran actually built underground, because most people watching the news have no real idea just how enormous and sprawling this network truly is. This isn't one single bunker hidden somewhere in the desert. It's a nationwide system, built patiently over 30 full years, funded through oil money and creative workarounds designed to avoid international sanctions. Fordow gets the most attention in the media, and it genuinely deserves that attention. Estimates put it somewhere between 260 and 300 feet deep, buried entirely inside a mountain range. It was built specifically to house sensitive machines called centrifuges, which spin uranium at incredibly high speeds to increase its purity level. The higher that purity level gets, the closer the material moves toward weapons-grade quality. International inspectors have gone in and out of Fordow for years, counting equipment carefully, measuring enrichment levels and flagging violations whenever they found them. But inspections were never the same thing as actual destruction. Everyone involved understood that physically destroying this place through military force was, for a very long time, basically considered impossible. That was the entire point of building it in that specific location, at that specific depth. Then there's Natanz, Iran's other major nuclear site, and it presents a more mixed picture. It has both above-ground buildings and underground sections, but the underground parts there are noticeably shallower, somewhere around 25 to 30 feet of concrete protection. That depth actually falls within reach of older bunker-busting weapons already in the American arsenal. Fordow was always the one facility that required something entirely new to be built from scratch. But the underground story doesn't stop at nuclear sites alone. Over the last 15 years, Iran has also built what people commonly call missile cities. These are massive underground tunnel systems packed with ballistic missiles mounted on mobile launchers, ready to move at a moment's notice. Iran has actually shown some of this off deliberately on state television, releasing footage of long tunnels filled with missiles ready to launch. The messaging behind this was completely intentional. Even if you strike us first, we still have the ability to hit back from places you simply cannot touch or locate. That's not an accident or a coincidence. That's a calculated deterrence strategy. Build enough hidden, spread out firepower across the entire country, and no enemy will risk attacking you in the first place, because they know they can't possibly wipe it all out in a single strike. Think about the sheer scale of what that actually requires. You need engineers who can tunnel through mountains without collapsing them. You need ventilation systems that keep missile fuel stable in enclosed spaces for years. You need transport corridors that let mobile launchers move without being spotted from above. This isn't something built in a single presidential term. It's something built across generations of leadership, each one adding another layer, another tunnel, another site, until the whole country becomes a patchwork of hidden capability most of its own citizens never see. And that's really the heart of the strategic bet Iran made decades ago. They looked at the cost of building all of this, the money, the labor, the secrecy required, and they decided it was worth it because it bought them something. Money usually can't buy outright, the ability to absorb a first strike and still hit back. That bet paid off for a very long time, right up until the moment a weapon finally existed that could reach the one facility they considered completely safe from any conventional attack. I want to be completely honest here, because intellectual honesty matters more to me than sounding overly confident. Nobody outside of Iran's own government truly knows the exact depth, size, and current operational status of every single underground site scattered across the country. What we actually have access to is a mix of inspection reports, intelligence assessments, satellite images studied carefully by outside research groups, and Iranian state media, which naturally has its own reasons to make things sound either bigger or scarier than they might actually be in reality. So treat exact numbers you hear with a healthy amount of caution. It's easy to get caught up and dramatic figures thrown around online, but the responsible way to look at this is to focus on the pattern rather than the precise measurements. The pattern is unmistakable, even if the exact numbers shift depending on the source. What isn't in serious question, though, is the overall national strategy. Iran made the word unreachable the absolute center of its entire military mindset for 3 decades. And for the first time in 30 years, that word simply doesn't apply the same way anymore. If this is opening your eyes to something you didn't fully understand before today, do me a genuine favor and tap that share button right now, and send this video to one person who's been confused about what's actually happening in the Middle East right now. It helps this channel more than you'd probably think, and it costs you absolutely nothing. Now let's talk about how a mission like this actually comes together behind the scenes. Because dropping a bomb like the GBU-57 is nothing at all like flipping a light switch on and off. The B-2 bombers that carry this weapon are based in Missouri, thousands of miles away from the actual target. Every single mission like this requires extremely careful, deliberate planning. Crew rest schedules have to align perfectly. Maintenance checks have to be completed without a single error. Flight routing has to account for enemy radar coverage, and sometimes the aircraft even needs to be staged somewhere closer to shorten the total distance flown. And before any of that planning even begins, the actual decision to launch a strike like this travels all the way up the chain of command to the very highest levels of government. This isn't some spur-of-the-moment call made by a single officer. Lawyers carefully review it, intelligence teams thoroughly review it, analysts model out every possible outcome of what could go wrong and what happens in the aftermath. Nobody simply wakes up one morning and decides to send the most powerful conventional bomb in the entire world across the globe without being completely certain of exactly what they're hitting and precisely why. By the time that bomb actually left the aircraft's weapons bay, the people responsible for making these decisions had already concluded, with a high level of confidence, that the target was fully confirmed, that the weapon would perform exactly as designed, and that the potential risks were absolutely worth taking compared to the strategic payoff. That is not a small or casual decision by any measure. That is one of the heaviest, most consequential kinds of decisions any government can possibly make. The intelligence work sitting behind a mission like this goes far beyond what normal military planning usually requires. Engineers need to study the exact type of rock and soil composition sitting directly above the target, because that single factor changes how deep the bomb can realistically travel before losing momentum. Analysts need extremely detailed maps of the facility itself, figuring out precisely where the most important rooms are located, versus which sections are simply access tunnels or empty hallways. And someone, somewhere, needs to calculate that fuse timing down to fractions of a single second, based on exactly how fast the bomb is falling and how tough the specific material above the target actually is. This is the kind of intense preparation that takes entire teams of specialists working around the clock for days, and sometimes even weeks, before a single aircraft ever takes off from the runway. The simple fact that this mission actually happened tells you something extremely important on its own. The people running this operation were genuinely confident, and more importantly, they had the detailed information necessary to back that confidence up completely. Nobody in that chain of command wanted to be the person who authorized a historic strike based on guesswork. Every stage of this planning process exists specifically to remove guesswork from the equation as much as humanly possible, replacing it with verified data, cross-checked intelligence, and repeated simulations run long before the actual bomb ever left the aircraft. Quick pause, just for 2 seconds. If you're actually learning something from this, the comment section is where this conversation keeps going after the video ends. Type the word Fordow down below right now so I know you made it this far, and then let's keep going. So now let's get into what actually matters most in all of this. What did this strike really accomplish? And just as importantly, what didn't it accomplish? Because I'm not going to sit here and tell you this single strike solved absolutely everything overnight. That simply wouldn't be honest, and you deserve a far more balanced story than that. If the weapon performed exactly the way it was engineered and designed to, and every single test on record strongly suggests that it does perform this way, then the underground facilities it struck are genuinely gone. Not merely damaged, not just slowed down for a few months, gone completely. You cannot quickly or easily rebuild something buried hundreds of feet inside a solid mountain. That kind of massive construction project takes years of dedicated work, requires extremely specialized machinery, demands huge amounts of skilled labor, and needs materials that are becoming increasingly difficult for Iran to get their hands on because of ongoing international sanctions. The centrifuge halls, the power systems, the ventilation networks, everything that took over a full decade to build and carefully perfect, has now been crushed under the immense pressure of that single explosion. That is a real, deeply meaningful setback for Iran's entire nuclear ambitions, one that will show up in progress reports and timelines for years to come. I'm not going to downplay that reality for a single second. But here's where things get genuinely more complicated and where I want to be completely fair and balanced. Destroying a physical building is simply not the same thing as destroying an entire national program from its roots. Iran has been actively developing nuclear knowledge and technical expertise for more than 20 full years. That deep well of knowledge lives inside the minds of scientists and engineers who studied this field for their entire careers. It lives in documents, in established processes, in years of specialized training, and in institutional memory that gets passed down from one generation. None of that intangible knowledge was ever buried inside those physical tunnels. The building itself is gone, completely destroyed. But the people who actually understand how to design and build it again still exist, still walk around, and still remember everything they learned. There's also a genuinely important question about timing that we simply cannot ignore. We don't actually know for certain, with full confidence, what was physically stored inside these facilities at the exact moment the strike happened. If Iran had already quietly moved sensitive materials or key pieces of equipment out beforehand, anticipating that something like this might happen, then some portion of that material could have technically survived the strike, just without the protective mountain shell around it anymore. What we do know for absolute certain is that the protection itself, the very thing that made those materials feel completely untouchable, has been utterly destroyed. Even if some pieces of equipment did survive by being relocated in advance, they no longer have that physical shield protecting them the way they once did. Now here's the part of this entire story that I personally think matters more than anything else, and it reaches far beyond the borders of Iran alone. For 30 full years, the underlying idea behind digging incredibly deep was that if you go far enough underground, conventional weapons simply cannot physically reach you no matter what. That foundational idea has now been proven wrong. Not proven wrong in some controlled laboratory setting, not proven wrong in a simulated test, proven wrong in actual real combat against a real physical target in the real world. Every single country on this planet that has spent decades and untold billions of dollars building hidden underground facilities just watched that entire defensive strategy get publicly invalidated. The response from military planners sitting in rooms all around the world isn't simply going to be, let's dig even deeper than before. The response is going to be a serious, uncomfortable rethink of whether digging deeper even genuinely works anymore, no matter how much money any country decides to throw at the problem. That fundamental shift in global military thinking reaches far beyond just one country and one conflict. It quietly changes the entire worldwide calculation around what the word safe even actually means anymore. Let's talk honestly about what might realistically come next, because I know that question is sitting heavily on a lot of your minds right now. Historically speaking, when Iran gets struck directly like this, they don't typically respond in an equally direct way. They usually respond indirectly through other allied groups they support across the region, through missile threats aimed at specific targets, or through deliberate pressure applied on important international shipping routes. That particular approach has worked reasonably well for them over the years because it allows them to inflict real pain on their opponents without triggering a full-blown, all-out war that they know deep down they would ultimately lose. But here's the important thing to understand. That entire network of regional support groups has taken some genuinely serious hits over the past couple of years. Several of their key regional allies have been significantly weakened through repeated, sustained military pressure and targeted strikes. Their overall ability to respond indirectly simply isn't what it used to be even just a few years ago. I want to be genuinely careful here and not overstate this particular point, because groups like this have historically proven they can rebuild their capabilities over time, given enough patience and resources. But right now, in this exact moment, Iran's realistic and practical options for hitting back at their enemies are noticeably narrower than they've been in a very long time. There's also a quieter form of retaliation that doesn't involve missiles or proxies at all. Iran could slow cooperation with international inspectors, restrict access to remaining nuclear sites, or announce plans to enrich uranium at higher levels somewhere else entirely. That kind of response doesn't make headlines the way a missile launch does, but it carries its own weight. Force doesn't always produce cooperation. Sometimes a cornered country digs in instead, and that's worth watching just as closely as any military response. A direct missile strike against American or Allied targets carries an extremely high level of risk, a level of risk that Iranian leadership has historically chosen to avoid whenever the opposing side has clearly shown they're serious and fully prepared to respond. And right now, with military forces clearly and visibly positioned in the region, demonstrably willing and able to use their most powerful available weapons without hesitation, that particular message comes through loud and clear, with absolutely no translation needed at all. So where does all of this genuinely leave us at the end of the day? This strike stands as one of the most significant military events of the last 20 years, not simply because of the sheer size of the explosion, but because of exactly what it proves to the entire watching world. Iran's long-held belief that depth automatically equals safety has now been completely and publicly broken. The deep confidence that allowed them to keep pushing their nuclear program forward for decades, believing they were fundamentally untouchable no matter what anyone did, that specific confidence took the real, lasting hit here today. Physical buildings can eventually be rebuilt again, given enough time, money, and specialized resources. But the psychological shield, the deeply held belief that nothing could ever possibly reach them no matter what, is now gone. And it's simply not coming back in the exact same way it existed before. What happens next depends entirely on a series of choices that genuinely haven't been made yet by anyone involved. Whether Iran quietly tries to rebuild everything in secret somewhere else entirely, far from prying eyes, whether they completely change their overall strategy going forward, whether the world ends up seeing more dramatic moments exactly like this one in the coming months and years ahead of us. Nobody watching right now, from analysts to ordinary citizens, knows for certain what comes next. Some analysts believe this pushes Iran toward the negotiating table faster than any sanction could. Others believe it pushes them further underground in every sense of the word, more secretive, more determined, more convinced that survival depends on never trusting the outside world again. Both outcomes are genuinely possible, and honestly, both have happened before, in various forms in other conflicts around the world throughout modern history. But one single thing remains clear. The story didn't simply end with this one strike. It changed shape entirely, and it's still unfolding in real time, right in front of all of us. Here's a genuine question that I truly want your opinion on. Do you personally think destroying these physical underground bunkers actually changes Iran's ambitions in any meaningful way? Or do you believe a program exactly like this one simply survives for as long as the underlying scientific knowledge, the experienced people, and the political will exist? Drop your honest answer down in the comments section below, because I personally read every single one of them carefully, and I genuinely want to know exactly where this community as a whole truly stands. If this particular video gave you a noticeably clearer picture of this entire situation than anything else you've watched so far on this topic, then that's precisely what this channel is here to do for you. Hit that subscribe button right now, turn on notifications so you never miss anything important, and let's keep making real sense of these complicated global moments together, one balanced breakdown at a time.